I'm Magalie Laguerre-Wilkinson, and welcome to Arts in the City. We're here at beautiful Wave Hill, a public garden and cultural center up in the Bronx. Summer's a time to sit back, relax, and forget about the woes of winter. So we thought it'd be nice to take a look back at some of our favorite stories from this past season. Some people may not consider graffiti art, but a special exhibition focusing on street art just may change your mind. Have a look at our story from March. The newest exhibit here at the Museum of the City of New York is called City as Canvas, showcasing the expansive collection of 70s and 80s graffiti art amassed by artist and collector Martin Wong, a mentor to many of those budding artists. Charlie Ahearn, the filmmaker of the iconic film Wild Style, about that era, talks about its unforgettable and often illegal beginnings.
The city was bombed by 1971. Surfaces all over New York City were covered with inky, drippy tags of various people's names. The question was, what is this? It was just like a complete horror to people in New York because the city was in a state of free fall financially. Neighborhoods were in a state of collapse. Buildings were empty. Fires were raging, and it was a tragedy of unspoken scale. There was a kind of new movement in New York which started with graffiti, which centered on teenagers being free and doing things to make themselves felt in the world.
At first, it was just naming or tagging, as they called it, on the subway. It was dangerous, but they say worth it. Lee Quiñones, or Lee as he was called, started at 14.
Oh, it's exhilarating. I mean, it's reconfirming yourself in a very, very loud, distracted environment.
Lady Pink was 15, one of the few teenage girls who dared to do it.
Well, when you see your name rolling by on a subway train, they're dirty, they're loud, they're gigantic. It comes rumbling into the train station, and there's your name in full living color. It's very addictive, empowering, the fame, the glory.
Then it was not enough for these young people to write their names all over the surfaces of the subway. They had to create a style to stand out.
Don't even use the term street art because these words were not introduced yet. For us, it was graffiti. It was really writing. We were writers. I mean, strangely enough, we probably couldn't even read very well, but we consider ourselves writers. You know, it's kind of a joke. But later, graffiti artists, because then trying to transition into, hey, we're a little more creative than that.
This was the first of its kind. It had never been done to that scale and that kind of composition. Composed colors and all, and this was the first time that literally above ground, the artwork staked the flag of that we have arrived.
If you look at over here, you can see this is a subway car from 1983, and this was a really traditional way that we painted our names on the sides of a train. These sketches were drawn out previously, and then, sit down and map out the color scheme, often choose these different characters to either put in the center to sort of augment the lettering. But then at a certain point, it was time to build on that.
Sharp developed his style into abstract lettering. Futura 2000 created a unique figurative style. Another emerging artist from that time with his own style was Daze.
I was really influenced by Mad Magazine, underground comics, and the music and culture of the early 1970s.
These are highly personal works. They are coming from something very, very deeply either joyous or traumatic, real personal stories.
The painting I have here titled The Death of Graffiti shows a little naked woman standing on a pile of spray paint, pointing to the subway trains, saying that graffiti will die soon. It will be over. This great thing that we have all loved for so long through the 70s and such will come to an end. And eventually the war was lost, and the Transit Authority cleaned all the subway trains by 1989.
Downtown art galleries had already encouraged these young artists to paint on canvas so they could be shown in their galleries. Artist Martin Wong also saw the promise of their work. He nurtured their art on canvas and collected the best of it.
People in Europe began to know about this, and they thought of it as the new pop art from America. Like, you missed the last wave from New York City. That was pop art. Now it's too expensive. But you can afford a Lady Pink or a Daze or a Lee Quiñones.
Teens from around the world also flocked to Ahearn's movie Wild Style, starring Lee and Lady Pink and Henry Chalfant's Style Wars. They wanted to be cool too and express themselves through this new art form. Many of the artists who you see in this exhibit went on to global artistic and commercial fame.
And ultimately, illegal or not, they affected the city. They changed the way the world looks, because trains are clean now. We don't see this work on trains anymore, but we see it everywhere else. We see it in graphic design and advertisements. It's all over.
In April, we visited the Steinway & Sons factory in Long Island City. Andrew Falzone gave us an inside look at the artisans behind the pianos, those people who make each and every one of them by hand.
It takes almost 1 full year to make a piano at Steinway & Sons, and by the time it gets to Wally Boot, it's almost ready to leave the factory. If anyone knows when a Steinway is worthy of its name, it's Wally. He's been working here for 52 years.
I was just thinking the other day, I'm like hands-on quality control, because I'm the last one to touch the piano.
But if you walk around the Long Island City factory, it becomes apparent it's not just Wally who's obsessed with quality control.
I think it's 97% of every solo concert pianist plays on a Steinway, and there's a reason for that.
Bill Hughes heads up the restoration department at Steinway, which means he knows how to build a piano from the inside out. When a customer sent in an 1864 Steinway for a little updating, Bill led a team that made a century-and-a-half-old piano sound as good as new. He's been a part of Steinway for just over 40 years.
We gave a tour the other day, and one of the guys on the tour says, "I'm here 5 years." I said, "Yeah, in another 15 we'll consider you full-time." You know, so it's a kind of a joke. If you're not here 20 years and you haven't learned that much from us, you know, okay, you're still an apprentice.
In a factory that prides itself on having more hands than machines, most of the skilled craftsmen have learned their trade through an informal apprenticeship that can last for decades. Most of the workers are not artisans from overseas, but local guys who grew up with Steinway in their backyard. In fact, that's Wally in the Steinway lumber yard at just 2 years old. Even today, it's not uncommon for multiple generations of family members to work here, but unlike the faces that have changed over time, the building process has pretty much stayed the same at Steinway since it started over 160 years ago. Out of all the steps in the piano making process, nothing defies science more than the art of rim bending. It's the process of getting a piece of wood like this hard rock maple to look like those piano rims, bent and contorted beyond anything nature ever imagined.
The first major step, obviously, is the shape of the piano, what we call the bent rim. We are the people that designed that. We patented that process. There are still, I don't think there's another manufacturer of pianos in the world that does it the way we do, whereas we bend this all at one process.
Rim bending is perhaps the most dramatic step when making a Steinway. Before being bent, the wood is dried for 2 years, 1 year air dried, 1 year kiln dried. For the largest Model D concert grand piano, 18 layers of hard rock maple are steadily worked into a patented rim press.
We know how thick that wood needs to be. We use rock maple, which is the hardest wood you can get. So yeah, it's tough to bend. The guys down there, it's literally brute force. They use big wrenches and big equipment to just tighten these things into a big press that gives us this shape.
While the rim is being formed, other piano parts are being prepared in other units. The action department assembles and balances the keys and links each of the 88 with its own hammer, which will eventually strike the strings inside the piano.
When you hear about Steinway piano, we'll mention that there's 12,000 parts inside that piano. Well, almost about half of those parts are in that action alone. That when you hear a piano played, there are literally 57 parts in each note that makes that note ring.
The guts of the piano are prepared in another building which houses a group of workers in the belly department. The soundboard is made of Sitka spruce and is placed inside the case.
We call the belly department or the soundboard of the piano the soul of the piano. And if you're going to look at it that way, then the action is the heart. Heart gives you the beat, the soul gives you, the color and all that other good stuff.
The bridge is glued on top and notches are hand carved so that the pins can be hammered in one by one. Along with a massive iron plate, the pins will anchor the 243 strings that will withstand more than 45,000 pounds of pressure when properly tuned.
We're building in wood parts to thousandths of an inch. This is wood, and it expands and contracts with different humidity and temperatures, and we're still working to within thousandths of an inch to get these little tiny parts. We're dealing with friction tolerances, dimensional tolerances. It's a very complicated piece of equipment.
Along the way, the piano has either been given a coat of ebony lacquer or stained to reveal the natural grain of the wood. And then, just before it heads out the door, it meets up with Wally, who listens to each note for the piano's character.
I go by the personality of the piano. Okay. Some pianos are bright, some pianos are mellow.
It surprised us to learn that Wally didn't always play the piano, but learned on the job. With plenty of time to practice during the day, he was able to make the most of his lessons, which lasted only 15 minutes each, once a week.
I can put my feeling into it, my love for pianos.
Did the pianos love you back?
Of course. Every Thursday when I get paid. I would do this for nothing, but don't tell them.
All that hand craftsmanship comes at a price. The smallest concert grand from Steinway starts at $58,000, while the largest Model D concert grand that Wally was working on starts at $149,000. In fact, the most expensive piano ever sold was a Steinway. It was named the Sound of Harmony and was sold to a Chinese art collector for just over $1.6 million. But regardless of the cost, back at the factory, it all comes down to pride.
And anytime they know that a Steinway is going to be somewhere, we get an announcement, hey guys, it's either going to be on The Tonight Show or on American Idol. And you realize that you're developing a work of art that, again, not only a visual work of art, but an audible work of art. And people around the world love that. And I carry that with me everywhere I go.
For Arts in the City, I'm Andrew Falzone.
He's a filmmaker, producer, writer, and musician. You might call John Forte a modern-day Renaissance man. Last September, Tina Beth Pena sat down with him, where he spoke candidly about his work and the rather serious detour he took along the way.
Sing this song for our heart. Tell the world who we are. May the sun shine your light. I will never leave your side, your side, your side.
My name is John Forte. I'm from Brownsville, Brooklyn. I am a filmmaker, a producer, a writer, musician, a New Yorker. My mom, who raised my sister and me on her lonesome, was never a pusher, and she didn't pressure either of us to do things. So for me, I remember signing up for music in school. So I picked up a violin when I was 8, and that was the beginning of it. While I thought that my training with the violin was good, I met kids who whose training surpassed mine, you know, by many, many years, and that was really humbling. And then I had to ask myself, all right, well, if I can't be #1 violin, what can I be #1 at? And that's when I think my desire to be the best lyricist that I could be, that's when that really emerged.
That ambition led John straight to the executive level, becoming the director of A&R at Rawkus Records at 19. It was here that Forte would be introduced to and eventually become a part of the celebrated hip-hop group, the Fugees.
John Forte, grab the mic, don't sway it this way. I'm more than just a rhymer, you still a small timer.
From that collaboration, there was so much success. How did that make you feel?
Here I am, 19, 20, 21, coming from Brownsville, going to Phillips Exeter Academy, coming home, having the opportunity to work with the Fugees, traveling the world, being nominated for awards, winning some of those awards, and then being groomed for my solo album. So when the album was released, it came out to critical success but commercial disappointment. So instead of asking myself, well, what did I do wrong or what could I have done better, it was so easy for me to say, well, you guys failed me. You know, the record company failed me, management failed me. So I went up to Sony, you know, with one finger pointing at everyone else, you guys all failed me. And Sony swiftly released me from my contract, essentially dropped me from the label.
John looked for a financial opportunity which would support his music and became a middleman who acquired couriers for a drug dealer.
And it wasn't because I wanted to be a drug dealer myself, but I saw it as a means to an end. I would make enough money. Well, when the House of Cards did fall, and 2 of the couriers were apprehended in Houston, Texas, the only person they knew in the operation was me. So I ended up being named and being indicted. It was a first-time nonviolent drug offense. And in 2001, I was sentenced to 168 months or 14 years in a federal prison.
Oh Lord, penalties for suffering can seem so hard. Dreaming the days when everything's so dark. Tried to walk good, where does that road start? Show.
I was about 3 years into my sentence that a friend of mine came to me with a guitar, but unbeknownst to him, I did not know how to play the guitar. He assumed that because of my musical background, that this would be the light that I needed in the darkness. And while I didn't know it at that moment, he was absolutely right, because days later, I actually picked the guitar up and I strummed a little bit. And I was determined to learn how to play it. And I taught myself, you know, a couple of chords at a time, how to play the instrument. And that was probably the most empowering moment of my life, because for years I'd been beholden to DJs or other people to make music for me, but I was never able to accompany myself.
In 2008, John's 14-year prison sentence was commuted by the president, and he was a free man, a testament to the dedication of those who tirelessly campaigned on his behalf, including iconic singer Carly Simon.
I don't ever want it to be misconstrued that I'm glorifying the mistake that I made and that I'm somehow benefiting from that.
Did being incarcerated change your musical sensibilities?
Yes. I think you feel like an animal when you are in prison. You feel like an animal when you're in that cage. So I wanted to contribute to myself as to prove to myself that, you know what, you are not a thing, you are not an animal. And I think that was a pivotal point for me in terms of how I would make music and what my music would be about. It would be about my quest for dignity.
In the years since his release, John continues his quest for dignity through new music, writing a memoir, directing films, and embarking on a multimedia adventure. It's the type of work that allows him to nurture that creative spirit within.
Because for so many years, I was either living in the past, regretting things, or living in the future, and I hope this happens, I hope that happens, and I was taking the present for granted. So one of my favorite sayings is, you know, it was what it was, it is what it is, and it will be what it will be. I can't change the past, and I can perhaps influence the future to a degree, but the only thing that I truly possess is this moment. I've been blessed, and I feel blessed, and the only thing that I can hope for is to continue to be blessed, and to hopefully know that I am blessed, even at times when I think that I'm not.
At the end of a long, hot summer day, who isn't ready for a little break? We found some unique dining spots at several of the city's museums. Revisit them with us from a story earlier this year. Long considered to be an afterthought or a place to grab a quick bite, museum restaurants are now destinations to seek out. Our first stop took us to the Modern at MoMA in Midtown Manhattan, where we met with the restaurant's general manager, Dino Lavarini.
We were fortunate enough to open with the museum when it reopened in 2004. So we're in our 9th year, which is pretty phenomenal. It's gone like a blink of an eye. In addition to a Michelin star, we've also been recognized by the James Beard Foundation 4 times and the New York Times with 2 3-star reviews, which we're thrilled with.
Much of the Modern's success is due to the creativity and presentation of its world-class cuisine. Getting the chance to try one of their signature desserts, the Modern Black Forest Fantasy, was a fantasy indeed.
There's a festival going on in my mouth right now. My palate is very happy.
But it's not just the food, it's also the gorgeous design.
Our chef is inspired by that which he sees in the garden, that which he sees in the galleries, and it's constantly changing. You know, we do look at the restaurant even as a curated exhibition. What you will see is that the first impression of any meal is really the beauty that comes in color and shapes on really what is a blank canvas. And then when you begin to taste the different components of the dishes, you'll reach the essence of what the chef is offering in terms of the experience, the exhibit.
Traveling over the East River to Queens, we dropped by the more casual M. Wells Dinette inside the sister museum of MoMA, PS1. Owner and executive chef Hugues Dufour opened his restaurant a year and a half ago to glowing reviews. Dufour capitalized on that success and recently opened a new restaurant, M. Wells Steakhouse, leaving longtime sous chef Aidan O'Neill in charge of the kitchen at M. Wells Dinette.
The idea of doing an art museum restaurant was really appealing for me.
Aidan's a painter as well, and he does.
So it's an art form.
So that was like.
I dropped out of art school to cook.
Really?
So it was funny that I ended up back in an art museum.
It's kismet. Yeah.
So we did it for him.
Yeah, it was really for me.
Even though it did seem like an obvious pairing, M. Wells did struggle to find an identity early on.
In the beginning, like it was quite impractical because people would come in for coffee and we'd be trying to do takeout, and we'd also be trying to operate the restaurant as a restaurant. But you know, we're getting better.
Chef O'Neill said having curators of the museum's exhibits dine in his restaurant also has its benefits.
What is contagious is the energy of the people that install the shows and the curators and talking to them and experiencing like the delight through them. It's definitely, when they come in and eat, we get to like hear about like all the stuff that like what a mind-altering experience it is to try and get like art from Amsterdam to here in a jumbo jet overnight and installing it and then like, talking to the installers. That's just super stimulating.
Walking into the restaurant feels like a trip back in time. The space where the museum is now used to be a public school. With desks serving as tables and the food menu scribbled on a chalkboard for everyone to read, the restaurant space feels like an attempt at tricking the museum goer into thinking they've entered another exhibit within the museum.
I think like we end up being in tune with the museum and the way I think the space, the people around influence a lot, like the way we cook and stuff, and that's the way it should be.
From Queens, we made our way to Brooklyn, where, after spending 14 years in Boerum Hill, executive chef Saul Bolton decided to move his Michelin-starred restaurant into a much larger space, the Brooklyn Museum.
I think they approached us because they knew we're really part of Brooklyn, that we would fit in well to this situation. You know, we're not particularly trendy, but we produce beautiful things, beautiful food that really would fit the model of what they were trying to do.
Tell us a little bit, because we are in a museum. There is this new trend, it seems, of restaurants in museums. What is that all about?
I think museums are realizing that in a competitive world of today, you can have world-class art, you've got to have world-class cuisine. America's taste is evolving, and it's evolved a lot where people are not just going to come in and accept the same old song and dance when they come into a museum. They want something, if you see a beautiful exhibit, what a downer it is to actually come in and have airline food.
Talk about the concept of food also as an art form.
Unlike a lot of the art that you have in the galleries that's timeless, and it's preserved to be so, and it's captured, and it's there, and it's semi-permanent state, and inspires people as they walk by it every single day, and it evokes different kinds of feelings and thoughts. And the food, as I said before, we approach it very much from a craft point of view. And we're craftspeople, but there are periods, points in time, where the food is able to transcend that, and all that craft that goes into it, the execution of it, makes it possible.
I'm Magalie Laguerre-Wilkinson for Arts in the City. That's our show for today. We'll be back next month with all new stories. From Wave Hill, I'm Magalie Laguerre-Wilkinson for Arts in the City.